Mr Speaker, I rise this afternoon to speak to the matter before us. A little surprised that the government, in putting forward its own matter to be discussed about the economy and about the stadium, spoke for, I didn't quite catch the clock, but maybe just less than 10 minutes on a 40-minute opportunity. So where this government is so determined, seemingly obsessed with building a stadium and prioritising that over the needs of Tasmanians, over the needs of Tasmanians seeking support in the health system, Tasmanians that are desperate to find housing, Tasmanian educators that are desperate for the attention of this government and the minister to recognise the working conditions and the needs that they have to support Tasmanian children, they can find one person to speak for less than 10 minutes on what seems to be a signature project for them right now. It is so important that they took up the time of this parliament to attempt to and in fact, I'm not really sure what they're trying to do with this afternoon. I'm really confused by what's just happened. I'm also confused because if there's anybody that knows myself well, anyone knows that Tasmanian Labor right now, anyone that has been working with us or supported by us would do nothing other than describe us as, and I can't remember, the member for Franklin just then suggested that myself and by association Tasmanian Labor were tired and depressed. Now, if anyone knew me and knew what fuelled my system in order to stand up for Tasmanians and to deliver a message on behalf of Tasmanians to this government, I don't know anyone that describes me as tired and depressed. So when someone's actually standing to take their place in this parliament to advocate for a government position in under 10 minutes and suggest that we don't know what we're talking about or we don't have our priorities right, I think they need to go back and reflect on where they're at right now, reflect on what their priorities are, and reflect actually on taking a moment to get out of their bubble and reconnect with Tasmanians in order that they would understand the message that Tasmanians are so desperately trying to deliver to them, that it is not the right time now to build another stadium in Tasmania, another stadium in Hobart, when there are so many other pressures facing the Tasmanian community. Now, the motion before us reads that we welcome the Tasmanian Government's commitment to an arts, entertainment and sporting precinct, noting the report and noting that the proposed stadium would list out a whole lot of opportunities for Tasmania. Now, I haven't spoken to anybody in the last 24, 48 hours, in the last 7 to 10 days that welcomes this commitment, this obsession by the government, and so this afternoon we will not be supporting this motion before the House. What I wanted to do is actually run through the questions that have been raised with me and share them with the Parliament in order that the government might take some time to reconsider their position. That's in fact what we've been seeking to ask the government to do, to reconsider the burden that you're placing on Tasmanians at a time where it's not needed and it's not wanted, and the Tasmanian community can't see how you could possibly afford to prioritise this over investments in other essential needs for Tasmanians. Now, as someone that's been in this place for a short period of time but been in local government for much longer and has been involved with so many capital projects and large projects, there are a whole range of things that an organisation that was actually credible and worthy of actually delivering such great projects would go through to get to a point where they would make a commitment. They would actually go through the process of really understanding both the capital costs that they're burdening a community with and also those operational costs. Earlier this morning it was suggested that we didn't understand the difference between capital and operational because we were comparing some operational costs and capital costs, as though the Treasurer himself didn't understand that you build this stadium and there are going to be operational costs. And perhaps he didn't understand this because they've spoken today and on previous days and in other weeks here about the fact that they're going to do a feasibility study and that will inform a business case. And Minister Barnett just earlier said, and that if the business case stacks up, we might deliver this project. Now, it sounds to me as though the strength and support of this government for this significant project is starting to fall away. It sounds to me as though there's division in the government about this project. It sounds to me as though there are people that are not so sure that this is the right thing to do. So my question is to the government, to the Premier, why do you remain so obsessed when there are so few people that support this? Earlier, my colleague Dr Broad shared with the Parliament the bizarre effort last night of one of the members of the North West Coast seeking to somehow make a reflection on the opposition. That just backfired so poorly. The last count that I saw was 110 comments, of which most of those comments were delivering to the government a very clear message to say this is not the right time and it's not the right type of infrastructure to invest in. Tasmanians are really clear. Tasmanians live each and every day with the pressures of the rising cost of living, with the pressures of not being able to make either their rental or their mortgage payments with increasing interest rates, with the pressures of increasing power prices. Now, this government from time to time say to us that we stand for nothing. Well, I'll tell you right now what we stand for. We stand for supporting Tasmanians in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and we call on the government to cap power prices, do the things that are within your control and ensure that Tasmanians can pay a Tasmanian price for Tasmanian power. Because all of the things that you do that say that we have no position on are the things that you are failing with as a government. Anyone that's been watching for the months and months ahead will see how strongly Tasmanian Labor was standing in the corner of regional Tasmania, standing in the corner of our local fishers, ensuring that the economies of regional Tasmania weren't devastated by the decisions that the government were about to make. It is only for us working with Tasmanians that the Tasmanian economy and the regional economy continue to be supported in this place. It's not because of the work of the government. The government is seeking to undermine Tasmanians in their effort to support regional Tasmania. It's Tasmanian Labor that is standing with the people right now and supporting the needs in this community. Now, with this stadium that is being proposed, where the government have no idea how much it's going to cost, and I heard our leader, Rebecca White, just earlier say, you know, it's really curious. There was a decision, a commitment of this government made one day in this place, seemingly without any prior consultation or discussion with anybody, and someone just stood up, the former Premier, and announced that we would have this stadium. There was a suggestion that a stadium at Regatta Point might cost $750 million. Now, there was an admission by parts that this was really just the scratchings off the back of an envelope, and we really didn't know, or the government really didn't know, how much such a proposal would cost. And also, what's important when we consider these matters is that the government present figures, but actually maybe to build a stadium there might be a certain amount, but what about all the other associated infrastructure and all of the other things that are required to be delivered to ensure that actually a project comes off? Now, if this government were so good at developing capital projects, they would know and be upfront with the Tasmanian community about all these other associated costs. But how curious, the back of the envelope scratching, $750 million, and then a new decision to move it around the corner and down the road a little bit at Macquarie Point, a different type of stadium with different qualities and different elements. Again, $750 million. Now, I heard someone else in this place earlier say it could be at least twice that amount to realistically develop a stadium of this nature in Tasmania. Now, who knows how much it's going to be, but just say it is twice as much. Then this morning we heard the Treasurer say that this government, not that they're committed to $375 million towards this project, but up to half of the capital costs of this project. So actually we're burdening Tasmania with an unknown amount of capital infrastructure to be delivered for a stadium that people don't need or want. And it's not $375 million that the government has previously suspected, but the Treasurer this morning says that it would be up to half that amount. Now, let's just move away from capital costs for a little while and talk about operational expenses. We're hearing that, yes, there's a feasibility study that will happen, that will lead to informing a business case. So this government have committed and in the Hansard earlier this week, it was said, we will build a stadium at Macquarie Point. It's determined that it will happen without any understanding of those operational costs that are going to occur in that place, without any understanding of the maintenance costs, without any understanding of the depreciation burden, without any understanding of the increasing costs of interest that will be applied across the borrowings to deliver this project. Now, without any knowledge of what that's going to take, it is so irresponsible of this government to make this decision and burden Tasmanians at this time where there's so many other pressures in our community. Now, if we move away from capital costs, from operational costs, and we move towards the infrastructure that already exists in Tasmania. Now, there's been some commentary just this afternoon about the incredible York Park in northern Tasmania, in the electorate that I represent in Bass. Now, yes, there have been commitments to develop and do some upgrades at York Park, and they would see York Park delivered to the capacity of this proposed new stadium in Hobart. It is ridiculous when you have a facility in northern Tasmania that, whenever I've been at an event and people are visiting and coming to play on that turf, a turf that I've been so very proud as part of my time with the Launceston City Council to know that our team actually manage and maintain and look after, gets applauded as one of the best turfs in the country. People love coming to York Park. You sit in that stadium and you can see the beautiful surrounds of the mountains. You can see the great old buildings around the place. It is such a great place to come, not only for sporting events, but as one other member said this morning, in this new stadium in Hobart, they're hoping to have other sporting events in Hobart. Well, York Park already attracts and delivers great alternate sporting events. We have great BBL, the WBBL. We have great, whether it's being soccer, whether it be rugby. There are lots of other things that happen, and also we have great events. There are incredible events that happen in northern Tasmania. Now, there has been a commitment made to the communities of northern Tasmania, in fact to the entire Tasmanian community, particularly the people of Launceston and northern Tasmania, where at the moment we have incredible games at York Park. We have been able to attract marquee games to York Park, and there has been a commitment that there will be no fewer games at York Park in Launceston. Now, if we're able to have 4 marquee events in Launceston and 4 marquee football events and 4 other marquee events, blockbuster games and blockbuster events at York Park, then how is it that that commitment will remain if the proposed, considered, will happen sometime in the future business case for the new Hobart Stadium is going to attract and deliver 44 events? To make that project viable, they want to tell Tasmanians that they're going to have and deliver and attract 44 major events, sellout events no less, in order to make the viability work. Now, if you're going to try and do that every 8 days, have a top-level event in Hobart, firstly, when we've got mounting cost of living pressures, how are you expecting the Tasmanian community to have the funds, the additional funds in their budgets to be able to front up to an event every 8 weeks, every 8 days, not even every 8 weeks, and to do that without actually taking those events away from Launceston and northern Tasmania? There has been a commitment, and I've already put it on the record, that the community of Launceston and northern Tasmania would fight this government tooth and nail if that commitment is not maintained. If Launceston and northern Tasmania, knowing the benefit of these types of activities that come, particularly in the winter months in northern Tasmania, are taken away from our community to help make more viable another stadium that's not needed and not wanted in Hobart, then there would be an uprising in northern Tasmania. We know that also there is a great stadium in the south. Bellerive as a stadium in the south already, and we've had other members who have been to events there talk about the benefits of such a stadium here. When Tasmania has great infrastructure, the member that stood and spoke earlier said that he wants this new stadium to be the best of the best in the country. Well, sometimes you have to look at the type of infrastructure that you need in a community and say, what have we got now? What can we do to improve that? Do we need to be the very best in the country right now, or are there other priorities that we've got? And the Tasmanian community, hands down, in the last, I can't even remember what time yesterday, we posted a petition to stop the stadium to allow Tasmanians to directly have their voices heard. Thousands of people have already signed that petition. It is clear, more clear than anything that's happened in my time here in just over a year, that Tasmanians don't want this. And what I don't understand is how this government are so out of touch or can't hear, can't see the rising of the Tasmanian community to say, you've got this wrong. I've had phone calls from people who have been die-hard, in the ditch, lifetime supporters of the Liberal Party that say, you know we're supporters of the Liberal Party, and they have got this wrong. It is not the right time and it is not the right investment now. Now, even the task force that did the work around this project said that in the future it might be the right time for new infrastructure, for new stadium infrastructure in Tasmania. But it's not the right time now. While the project at York Park could have improvements, while Bellreeve could have improvements, that AFL and others already deliver incredible outcomes on these facilities. Now, it's been said that, and I intentionally use the word infrastructure in my contribution just then, it's been said that as the member for Bass, I made a statement to say that we don't support new infrastructure. Now, that could not be further from the truth, and the government know that, and the government, in intentionally misrepresenting me both online on social media and in this place, have been called out. And I've called them out and said that is not what was being said at the time. And not only that, but the Speaker made a ruling on that. Yet people, the Premier included, ministers included, and even the new backbencher just now continue to reflect on that ridiculous comment. Earlier today, it has been said that when a member makes a personal explanation, that should be good enough for members. And there has been a personal explanation made, and I hope the chamber acknowledges that and works with that. The only thing that I can think of is this government is so desperate that they want to get out of the feeling that they've got right now that they've got this so wrong, that they've got to clutch at straws to try and make some sort of reflection on people on this side of the House in order that they can distract from what's going on from them, that they've got support falling away from them, they've got internal division about this project, yet they remain obsessed with delivering on this project. We will not be misrepresented in this place, and we will not have our record tarnished. There's been suggested that Tasmanian Labor stand for nothing. Well, I'll tell you what we stand for. We stand for Tasmanians. We stand for supporting Tasmanians that are under pressure right now. We stand for Tasmanians being able to not only pay a Tasmanian price for Tasmanian power, we stand for Tasmanians in regional Tasmania being supported for the contributions they make to their communities. And when this government seeks to undermine that, we stand with them to make sure that won't eventuate. And our farmers, I've talked about our fishers, we've talked about power prices, and our farmers who, there are 70 farmers right now under the line of the transmission line, and they have come together to deliver a message to this government to say, you need to respect and value us at least equally to the energy policies of Tasmania to ensure that the contributions we can make to Tasmania, to the country and to the world are not undermined by competing policies from this government. And they feel like they're not being heard or respected, and that's on this government. That's not on Tasmanian Labor. Tasmanian Labor stand with Tasmanians. We stand with supporting Tasmanians to ensure that they can have a great life. This morning on the lawns, we saw educators, we saw support staff, we saw people that give their life's work to educating our children feeling disrespected and disregarded by this government, not even having the time to go out and meet with them to hear how concerned they are right now about the circumstances that they're living. That's what Tasmanian Labor do. We stand with the people that need support to stand up to this government to see that they actually can prioritise on the right things. Getting back to basics to this government is so important. It's so important for Tasmanians that this government understand what's really going on. And in the context of building this new stadium and proposing to do this in Hobart, with the contributions that I've heard in question time this morning repeatedly and on other days this week, it is clear to me that this government haven't read the 3P advisory report and don't understand just how much pressure the Tasmanian community are under. They don't understand that it's not just a small number of people that are struggling in Tasmania right now. They don't seem to even understand their own dashboard results in terms of how many Tasmanians are waiting for housing, how many Tasmanians are waiting to see specialists, how many Tasmanians are on the elective surgery list. It just goes on and on and on, the number of Tasmanians that are feeling let down. They're feeling left behind, and they're feeling like this government doesn't want to or doesn't know how to understand what's really bothering them right now and what pressures they've got in their community. If this government took a moment and took a breath and said, actually, maybe we could go out and have conversations with everyday Tasmanians, then they would understand that pressure. But they are so obsessed with developing this new stadium in Tasmania that they don't seem to actually want to get what's important to most Tasmanians. And that's one of the things that I haven't understood in my time here. I haven't understood the difference between whether this government don't understand or don't want to understand, that they don't hear or they don't want to hear, that they don't get it or they don't want to get it. And for the many Tasmanians right now that are struggling, it's important that this government get back to basics and fix their priorities so that Tasmanians don't feel like they're not cared for and they're not important. There are so many people in our community making a contribution each day, whether they be in small business, whether they be on the land, whether they be on the water, whether they be an employee in our public service, or whether they be a worker in an incredible range of industries that we have in Tasmania. But it almost feels to me that in every sector that I come across, everybody that I speak to, there are worries in Tasmania that the government are just not picking up on and understanding why it's not the right time to build this infrastructure in Hobart right now. What I want to do is also reflect on things that I've been hearing about why this isn't the right time. So in terms of building new infrastructure, we all know that infrastructure has the capacity. We know that infrastructure has the capacity to develop economic growth. However, sometimes you can build things that don't actually support growth or don't actually deliver outcomes for a community or don't seem to actually be productive or beneficial decisions and projects. But if this government focused on delivering things of quality well for Tasmanian people, then they might trust that, as Minister Barnett said, this government has the capacity to walk and chew gum. But when, for instance, I speak to a lot of people because I drive up and down the Midlands Highway regularly, and I speak to other people that are on that road, and they just question why is it that whenever they see a new piece of road being built, that not long after it feels like just the quality is not there. And what is it about this government that is finding it so difficult to deliver just basic infrastructure projects to the quality that Tasmanians expect? Why is it that when you could actually be delivering productive infrastructure and positive outcomes for Tasmanians, you struggle to be able to deliver on the quality that people expect? So right now, it's not just that Tasmanians have all these other pressures, that Tasmanians have all these other worries that they're not able to live on and live with comfortably, but they don't trust that this government can actually deliver. They don't trust that when the government makes announcements, it is actually able to follow through. We started to hear some quivers in the voices of some of the ministers this morning saying, well, maybe. Or we saw masses of pauses and crickets when tested and pushed on whether these ministers actually supported the stadium, whether they could actually respond. At moments there was silence and crickets. So when we can't even tell whether this government is united in the position and backing of this stadium, then why would the Tasmanian people trust this government to deliver it? And why would the Tasmanian people trust that this government and it was one of the comments on a Facebook post on Minister Ellis's last night that said, why would we trust that if you commit to this project that you're not just going to leave all the other projects behind? Like, for instance, in our community in Launceston, the LGH. Now, how many times has there been an announcement that there will be a $580 million master plan development of the LGH? How many times has that promise been made to the community but not actually followed up on? Yes, there's works progressing. Yes, there's, all these things in train. But for the cost that you're saying the stadium will be, you could deliver the LGH master plan and more so. You could deliver other projects in the community. So why is it that you're actually prioritising a stadium in Hobart that we don't need or want over the redevelopment of the LGH that the community is crying out for, when the LGH has the worst bed block, when we've got ambulances ramping and ambulance officers just at their wits' end and close to breaking point, where we've got nurses that, and we heard the part-time health minister and part-time Premier this morning talking about statistics of new nurses, but how many nurses aren't in those positions because they're off, they're unwell, they're stressed, they're not able to actually front up to work because of the conditions that they've been in. We know that the work required at the LGH is urgent. We know that this government, if they had their priorities right, would commit the funds to the LGH development over another stadium in Hobart. But that's not what this government's about. We know that, and all of our officers on this side of the place have people every week coming to our offices who are struggling to secure safe and affordable housing. We know that if this government were actually honest about their commitment and their ability, because it's always talking about what's actually your commitment to something, what's your ability or your capability to deliver on it. And we know that you can spruik all sorts of numbers about housing developments in Tasmania, but how many houses are you actually delivering? The figures that you've actually put out in your big plans for housing should see you building 3 houses a day. Now, for every day that you don't deliver, that's a greater burden on the expectation that you will deliver. It's not okay for Tasmanians anymore to hear minister upon minister make announcement and not follow up and deliver. Tasmanians lose faith in people when they make statements and don't or can't deliver. Whether it be on the LGH, whether it be on housing, whether it be the people in our public sector workforce who have be vulnerable and shared what's actually happening for them in their workplaces. We saw the educators this morning talking about their poor conditions. We've seen ambulance officers having action. We've seen our nurses. We've seen our child safety officers. We've seen our fireys all have to take action because this government's not listening. Right now, when there are so many challenges right across, whether it be the workforce, whether it be across health, whether it be housing, whether it be the pressures of cost of living, Tasmanians will not be fooled by this government. Tasmanians are catching on to the fact that this government can say all sorts of things but actually cannot deliver. And right now, when you're saying you want to deliver this new stadium in Hobart, they're saying, why would you do that when you're not actually even delivering on the basics? You're not getting the basics right now. So why would we trust that you want this big, great, shiny object in Hobart when we actually want the fundamentals to be delivered? Tasmanians expect a government to understand where they're at, to understand what it feels like to live under pressure. This government will repeatedly say that they've got all these great supports delivering for people in our community that are finding it tough. But what I've said repeatedly and what they don't seem to be able to understand is it's not just Tasmanians who are in a small cohort that are struggling. There are more and more Tasmanians every day finding it tough. There are more and more Tasmanians living every day with the needs of health services that they just can't get access to. There are more and more Tasmanians every day on the lists for housing that they have no confidence or trust that they will be able to secure. There are more and more Tasmanians struggling every day. Yet this government seems to think that a brand new big shiny object in Hobart is going to somehow fix the economy in order that... And I have to say, I thought he got it wrong when he said it first, but it actually has never been withdrawn and they keep seeming to double down on it. But the Premier seemed to indicate to Tasmanians that we build a big stadium and we'll be able to fund health. We'll be able to fund housing. Now, I get the economy and I get growing the economy is an important thing, but that doesn't actually give you extra state revenue to the point where you can fund your hospitals. And if it can, I would love to see the evidence of that. Because of all the stadiums that I've seen that have been developed around the country, and in my time at the Launceston City Council, we did a lot of looking around stadium development. When we were looking at the things that we wanted to deliver, not one stadium did we ever find that was actually positive revenue. Now, when you go through your feasibility and you get to your business case and you go, oops, you know, we buggered up there because you can't actually do this. What we said to the Tasmanian people isn't in fact true. Then what are you going to do? Where are you going to tell Tasmanians that you're going to get the funds from to cover the operational expenses for this stadium in order that you are going to be able to run this facility and it doesn't end up like the Silver Dome that people refer to as the white elephant, or it doesn't become like another project. You say that the solution to this stadium is events, and how amazing will that be? Well, I tell you what, other people have talked up the outcomes of basketball in Tasmania. They've talked up the outcomes of My State Arena. They've talked up the outcomes of the Jack Jumpers. Now, there was a pretty clever and intelligent person driving all of those things who made masses of personal investment into making sure that would happen on what is comparatively a fairly small scale. You've got a stadium that needs to put in 5,000 people to come in to see a basketball game a few times a year and other events. That's nothing compared to a 23,000 seat capacity stadium, which is already in addition to the stadium in the north that can have that capacity and the stadium in the south. And then you want to put 44 events there. Now, I can remember when the PW1 project was being spruiked, and there was going to be all these events and it was going to make it all so amazing. And actually, it is an incredible facility, but how many events have been delivered there? I would love this government to put on the record how many events they've been able to attract to that venue. How many events do you seriously think that you can attract to this new stadium that won't take away from other events in Tasmania, that will actually be able to be used for the delivery of such a massive project? Now, people have talked about Robbie Williams, and Robbie Williams coming down to Tasmania, and then 43 others just like that. Or you take out a few football games, let's just say 35 others just like that. Now, I'm going to leave some time for others to speak. I know there'll be others that want to make a contribution on this, but I'm going to leave you with a couple of comments. And they come from Robbie Williams. This government is so out of touch. You have got your priorities so wrong. Tasmanians know it and they can see it, and they are trying to send you a message. It's time you stopped and listened, because if not, to quote Robbie Williams, you're going to come undone. No one's ever going to forget, because right now you're doing something stupid.
Yeah.